My name is Lindsey Curnutte, and this is On Air with Heritage Action, a podcast built for conservatives. Twice a week, we break down in 5-ish minutes or less how you can get involved today in the fight for conservative values. On today's episode, we're talking about how Democrats have corrupted a bill that's intended to help women who are fleeing domestic violence situations in order to push their own radical gender identity agenda that puts the safety of biological women in jeopardy. The bill is the Violence Against Women Act, or VAWA as it's called for short. VAWA consists of a number of government programs intended to help women who are dealing with domestic violence. And every couple of years, the programs in VAWA need to be reauthorized by new legislation in Congress. When doing so, Congress has the opportunity to adjust funding, add or remove programs, and change the rules for how funding is allocated. Now, last year, VAWA failed to advance after Democrats tried to add provisions to satisfy gun control groups and LGBTQ groups, but this year, a few moderate Republicans want this bill to be bipartisan. So they went back to the drawing board. But unfortunately, what they redrew is a step back for women. There's a lot of debate going on among conservatives about how to modify VAWA, or even if this bill is the most effective way to help women in these situations. But the left is weaponizing VAWA for their woke agenda. And the individuals who will suffer the most are the biological women that VAWA was originally intended to help. This version of VAWA is a step backward, not forward, for women's rights. So let's go over some of the issues that Democrats have added in. The first and most dangerous provision in the 2022 version of VAWA has to do with gender identity. This term, gender identity, it's a favorite dog whistle for leftists. And in the bill, it's included under sex-specific provisions, specifically ones about single-sex spaces like federal prisons and shelters for women who have been abused. In the very spaces that women need protection the most, they would be forced to share with men who identify or simply claim to be women if this bill is passed. This bill would literally require vulnerable women in shelters who are fleeing abuse to be housed alongside biological men in close quarters, putting them in even more danger. This alone should be a red flag. Under this new version of VAWA, safe spaces for biological women are no longer safe. But the whole point of VAWA is to help those vulnerable women. So what are we doing here? Another piece of the puzzle is, of course, the money. So it's kind of about how this $750 million price tag is being allocated. And parts of this bill actually carve out funding specifically for LGBTQ groups. Look, we should do everything we can to end domestic violence against women and support the victims, regardless of their sexual orientation. Excluding women who have experienced violence but don't check the right identity box is not just wrong, it's cruel. And we know that left-wing groups that support this bill will be prioritizing funding for biological men who identify as women. The bill codifies vague and leftist buzzwords like culturally specific communities and equity. We've heard that one before. And the unfortunate reality with this language is that the government has control over what equity or what culturally specific communities looks like in practice. Keep in mind, this is the same administration that has previously allowed racial discrimination when distributing COVID-19 relief, which is a violation of civil rights law. But back to VAWA. This version carves out specific groups like non-binary individuals or men who identify as women. But the original purpose of VAWA was to help women. Instead, it's making a mockery of hard-fought efforts to achieve equality for women. What's also interesting is the urgency that the Senate is trying to create around this year's version. The programs that make up VAWA are already funded at the DOJ, and they will be as long as Congress funds the government. There's no need for Republicans to accept this bad version of VAWA. So here's the bottom line. The 2022 Violence Against Women Act reauthorization makes a mockery of long-standing protections for biological women. The left is using this bill, which should address the rising rates of violence against women, to stuff liberal priorities that will put biological males into women's prisons and women's shelters, and also dole out funding intended to help women facing domestic violence on the basis of sexual orientation and gender identity. We've got a lot of information about this in a brand new op-ed from Heritage Action Executive Director Jessica Anderson and Heritage Legal Fellow Sarah Perry. We'll make sure that's in the description of this episode, so be sure to check that out and then call your senators. Tell them that this bill is not a compromise and it will hurt women. Go to heritageaction.com/action, find their number there for your senators, and call their office today. That's it for another episode of On Air with Heritage Action. Thank you for tuning in. If you like what you heard in today's episode, please click the follow button. If you want to receive a text message each time a new episode airs, text podcast to 51776 and you'll never miss an episode. That's podcast to 51776. Hi, it's me again, and we need your help. If you like the insights and activist resources that we're providing, please take just 1 minute and help us spread the word. So follow, like, subscribe, and share this episode of On Air with Heritage Action with your friends and family on social media or even over email or text. We need your help to get others involved in the fight to hold Washington accountable. And don't forget, you are also able to subscribe to the show on your favorite podcasting app on your smartphone. So in-app, you're going to search for On Air with Heritage Action and subscribe so you can download episodes and listen on the go. It's the best way to make sure you never miss a thing. Thanks.